I'm incredibly proud of the work we do here. We believe we have the world's largest password breach database. That sounds maybe potentially a bit nefarious, but it's quite the opposite. So we know, all things considered, if you're still using passwords, and a lot of people are still using passwords, either, so Alan, you may be using them as part of a credential with both a password and MFA in your personal life. Obviously, you use PKI at work. I've always had the viewpoint that MFA doesn't replace or protect a bad password. It adds an additional layer of assurance. So you want to protect that password. And we have a lot of customers or clients who do not have the ability to roll out devices due to complexity, cost, and they're still relying on passwords. So a good password it doesn't matter how complex it is, it can't be reused, it can't appear in a breach. So to protect those passwords, you really rely on the quality of your breach database. And as I said, we believe, and when we measure and customers compare us against other vendors that they use for this, they consistently tell us that our data is the best. So incredibly proud of the work we do there. We have some experts who go to things like DEF CON and win password cracking competitions there. So
let me just pause you there. Apologies for interrupting. Yeah. Cracking is an interesting topic, because I believe we do something that some of the other vendors don't do in this space. They just hold passwords that are already cracked. People have worked out what they are. But we actually do what the bad guys do, up to the point that we don't try and break into systems with them, because that's illegal. But before that point, if we do what the bad actors do, we can help our customers. Can you just briefly explain, in terms I'd understand, what cracking is and why that's valuable?
Good point. So cracking a password, you need to understand how passwords are stored. So we worked out very, very quickly early on that using password access, it probably wasn't a good idea to keep the actual plain text password, or the plain as we call it, on the server, because it meant other people could find out what your password was, including the administrators. So we use something called a hash algorithm, which is just a one-way algorithm. And if you put exactly the same text into that hash algorithm, so you mentioned SHA-256 earlier, you'll come out with the same set of bytes, or the hash. So
the same password will always generate the same hash?
Yes. On any system, anywhere in the world, if you use a bcrypt algorithm or SHA, you put the same text in, you'll always get the same hash. What that means is, once you've set that password and I've stored the hash, and you enter your password, all that I need to do is hash that password and compare the hashes. And I don't have to know what your password is. I just have to know that those hashes match. So generally, when we see breaches happen, and they happen constantly, and that information is available on the dark web to download, and sometimes in plain sight as well. You can grab those hashes from the breach. That doesn't necessarily mean that's giving you the password to log in. But the interesting part about password cracking is, if I can guess, if I have an idea of what your password is, I can put it through the same hash algorithm. And once I establish what the hash algorithm is, I can take lists of known words, I can take previously breached passwords, and I can try and start making guesses against those hashes.
So what you're saying is, for example, if my password, which it isn't, were password, you'll be glad to know, were password 2026, people would have already worked out what that hash is for that password. So that would already be known, that would be recognized.
Sometimes. So, for instance, WordPress used to use MD5, and that's a very fast algorithm. And what some implementations, and we've seen a breach this week, 10 million accounts breached, MD5, no salt. And so I can almost pre-compute those hashes, and I'll instantaneously know what the password is. And even if I put some kind of random text in front of your password, and that's called assault, to make that hash truly individual to you, I keep that random text in the plane. The MD5 algorithm still means it's not a very suitable algorithm. It means I can compute that very, 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 very quickly. And if we talk about things like SHA-1 or MD5, those are very, very fast hashing algorithms, and they're fast for a reason. They're supposed to be fast. They're used to order files and used in database systems. They're not really used to protect passwords. If you want to protect a password with a good hashing algorithm, then you use something that's very, very complex and relatively slow, and something that you can't use gaming hardware like GPU hardware to make many millions of guesses per second.
To the conversation on quantum cryptography, what we're doing here is the more compute power you've got, the more chance you have of cracking that hash.
Yes, but it doesn't matter how complex your hash is. Remember, I still need to compute that hash for you to log in, so I can't make it infinitely hard. So most hash algorithms run bcrypt, for instance, is a common one. So WordPress uses bcrypt, cost factor of 12. I can make about 3,000 guesses per second on a gaming graphics card. So your password still needs to be complex enough and unknown to me that I can't make 3,000 guesses per second and come up with that password.
So this is why the NIST guidelines now is to have a longer passphrase, because it's got more randomness in there, so it's going to be harder to crack.
Yeah. But if your passphrase is I love cats 1974, because that's your birthday, and you love cats, then although that's long, if you're using that everywhere, that's still bad. So the natural end game to this discussion is use a unique long password anywhere. And when you have to start choosing a unique password for every site that doesn't follow some kind of pattern that I could also work out, you just come to a point where it's best just to randomize that password. So if you have a Windows password, for instance, and you're still using passwords as one of your steps, one of your factors to log in, it's just really a good idea that your users are choosing either a random password and managing that in some other way, or using a really, really strong password that no one knows about. And the best way of doing that is a breach database. The bigger the better. And not only a one-to-one comparison. So if we take your password, I love cat 74, and we know that maybe every time you're asked to change that password, which is another topic, you make it 74, 75, 76.
Exclamation mark on the end.
Exactly. Our breach database is smart enough to know that the root of your password is really I love cats, and we're not going to let you choose any kind of variation of that. We're going to say, Alan, it's time to move on from your love of cats.
So that's an example of we're doing what the bad actors do, because they know that. And instead of trying to break into a system with it, we're making that data available to our customers to know that the passwords they're using are as safe as they can be.
Yep. And so it's a really interesting topic in itself. Sometimes it's best to just put that on-prem, but then you need to balance that with if there's a breach. So there's just been a breach of those 10 million credentials with MD5. And we'll be able to crack those very quickly. We've got some specialist hardware. We've got a knowledge of how to crack those incredibly quickly.
So it's not the fact that we can crack them. It's the challenge. It's the fact that bad actors would also be able to crack them, so they're not safe.
But I think
proving that they're not safe.
Yeah, we'll crack them first. And there's some really smart ways of us being able to check your password without you actually revealing your password to us. There's a specific implementation we use there. So really the message is really, really solid, big password breach database. I think we're on 11 billion unique credentials. Something that's adaptive in some way, so it's not just that exact password. It's the root, the stem we call it, of that password, and something that you can check in real time, and constantly be monitoring. Means that where you're still using passwords, you can extend the lifetime of that mechanism while you prepare for better and stronger alternatives such as passkeys or maybe PKI.
I think that's a really important point. One of the things I've seen in the industry is some people make perfect the enemy of better. So that they spend time looking at how do I get to a full passkey deployment, how do I get time moving towards a full PKI deployment, for example. But while that's happening, still about 70% of the data breaches out there are caused by weak passwords. So that's really quick to fix. Make sure you're not using an uncompromised password to start with. To me, that's the equivalent of, while you're worrying about putting security fences and guard dogs around your house, you haven't locked your front door. Yeah. Lock your front door, guys.
And it's so easy because there's no or very little user training involved. People know how to choose a password. And if the error message comes back and says, don't use that one's appeared in a breach, they'll know to move on. And we'll prompt them, saying, that part of the password you're using there, we know about that. Go away and choose something else. And you don't need to do a rollout. You don't need to implement any client software. You don't need to do any training. So I don't think anyone's saying that passwords are perfect, but I think you can extend the lifetime of them for longer than you think.
Or at least if you are using them, make them as secure as you can while you're planning to move to something better.
Agreed.